object and a square object. That's the platform, and the player is the square. So let's add a rigid body 2D for physics, and then let's also add a box collider so that the player can collide with the ground. And now we will need a script to control the horizontal movement of the player. So let's create a folder called script, and then let's open the folder and create a new C# script. Let's call it player movement. So now that you created the script, let's open it. If you're using VS Code, this might be a little bit different, the opening process of the file, but it should be pretty simple to resolve if you have any issues with VS Code. I'm using Rider, so that's why I was bringing VS Code up. It's opening right now. It may take a second. Let's see. Oh, okay. Let's just trust and open. Open new window. Let me also close this window. Okay, so now we have this script open, and then on VS Code you may not see these two functions already there, but you can easily write them, so it's not too big of a deal. So for our movement, what will we need? We will need a public integer value that is called movement speed, and then we may also need a private float value, actually. Private float value called x-axis. And then we'll also need to get our rigid body. So let's have a private rigid body 2D variable called RB. So now we have all our variables declared. We can first, let's make a void awake function. And what the awake function does is just once you press play, it automatically runs. So once the game is awake, it runs. So once you start playing, let's set RB equal to get component rigid body 2D. That's all we need for in this function. And then we don't actually need the void start function, I don't think, so let's get rid of it. And then in the void update function, we will need to constantly get our user input and store it inside the x-axis. So in order to do that, we will use this. So x-axis is equal to input.get axis, and then I have already set the horizontal axis, so I can just call horizontal, and then that should give us our player input every time the user is clicking A, D, or like the left button, or the left arrow button, or the right arrow button. So that's all we need there. And then let's create another function called void walk. And then here we'll take in a float value called, like, let's call x direction, xdir for short. And then we'll set the rigid body's x velocity to whatever this value is times the movement speed, because we're going to input the x direction. Every time we use the x direction variable will basically be the same as our x-axis variable, because we're going to input it into the function when we call it. So let's just say rb.velocity equals new vector2 xdir, times movement speed. And then for the y velocity, we can just keep the velocities the same from the previous frame. So let's just call rb.velocity dot y. And then now every time you call the walk function, the rigid body's velocity will change based on whatever you input. So let's now use the function to move our character basically. And whenever you're trying to handle physics in Unity, you should try to use a function called fixed update. It's different from update because it's not called every frame, it's called every time the physics engine is updated. So here we can just call walk bracket and then input our x-axis. And then that should be it. Now let's go back to our game. Not really game right now, but we're just doing some basic stuff. So here we can we can just drag this in, and then here you'll see the player movement script. So let's set our movement speed to, let's just do 10. So now if we run it, it will drop down, and then when we click A or D, it'll move. So I'm clicking A right now, it'll move to the left, and if I'm clicking D, it'll move to the right. And that's it for a very basic horizontal movement function. For a very basic horizontal movement function.